And the part of it is you can always tell people who are highly cognizant of what's going on in the educational community, because for many decades, concept mapping was thought to be the best way for people to learn. But here's the thing is when they actually compared these four techniques, it was retrieval practice that was by far the best of all approaches. And why is that? When you're first learning something, for example, when you're paying attention here right now, you're getting sort of weak sets of links in long-term memory, very weak. Each time, though, that you stop and ask yourself, what was her key idea? What was that point that she was making? In other words, you retrieve that idea. Each time you do it, you strengthen those sets of links. And that in turn helps you not only remember these ideas, but understand them more deeply. Think about it. Whenever you're trying to really figure out a tough topic, you go out for a walk and you're trying to figure out what's going on. What are you doing? You're not just doing this rote retrieval of a vocabulary word, not necessarily. You are actually trying to pull together the ideas of something very difficult. So retrieval practice is good for simplistic rote ideas like a vocabulary word, but it's also very good for much more difficult to grasp materials. It helps build understanding. So this is exactly what research has shown through hundreds and hundreds of papers. So retrieval practice is by far the best. One thing I should point out to you is, so I'm just completing a course on how to teach effectively online. And this will be part of the specialization on uncommon sense teaching. And one thing I've consistently noticed about online classwork is people don't encourage, professors and instructors do not encourage retrieval practice. Yet, retrieval practice is one of the best ways to learn. So if you can incorporate some retrieval practice into your coursework, using things like Pear Deck or Padlet is one way, or Kahoot, Quizlet, all of these kinds of things. There's ways for you to incorporate these in your online courses as well as your regular classes, and they will really make a difference with your students. Now, what happens if you don't retrieve? Well, you're not using those neural links, and your little synaptic janitor can sweep those links away because they don't seem to be being used. So this is why it's important to not only retrieve, but to retrieve repeatedly over a number of days. When you understand a concept, you have a pattern in your brain, and it's easy to take that pattern and use it to bridge into learning new things. In fact, new learning often fundamentally needs to connect somehow to patterns you've already laid, things you've already learned. And so metaphor is a fantastic teaching tool. If you are teaching at an advanced level in programming or physics or literature, metaphor is a key way to be able to pass along really complex topics by simplifying them to their essence and then transmitting that as the metaphor. So don't forget and don't look down on metaphor as a powerful teaching tool. What is most effective for tackling procrastination? And I can say, hands down, it is the Pomodoro technique. Now, if you already use this technique, great. This is a good reminder of the key elements of how to use it. If you don't use this technique, this is something you really want to incorporate into your learning toolbox. I can say, unquestionably, I have received tens of thousands of emails from people saying how much they really appreciate and have gained by using this Pomodoro technique. So what is it? Well, it was developed by Francesco Cirillo in the 1980s. It's super simple. All you do is turn off all distractions, so nothing popping up on your cell phone. So turn your phones to silent and make sure that there's nothing popping up on your computer. Set a timer for 25 minutes and then work as effectively as you can for those 25 minutes, realizing that work is almost like a form of meditation, and your monkey mind can, jump around sometimes, but always bring it back to focusing on your work whenever you realize your attention has wandered. And then when you're done with those 25 minutes, reward yourself with a relaxing break. This, as it turns out, is a really clever use of focused and diffuse modes. Remember, you're focusing as you're planting things in your brain, and then you have 5 minutes of a little break, that relaxing, stress-free period where you're letting that information kind of percolate through the rest of your brain. So many people like to study using like 4 periods of Pomodoro. So it's those 4 periods. Each of the first 3 are followed by 5 minutes of break, and the final one is a half an hour of break. Now, if you come to the first 5-minute break or any of the breaks, and you say, "Oh, look at this. Let's see what my text message is. I'm not going to focus. I'm just seeing what's there." And then you start responding to something. You've just gone back into focus mode. So what happens is whatever you've learned before that time, those little neural connections you made, they begin to weaken and atrophy instead of strengthen during that break. So that's why it's important to actually really relax mentally. Listen to a song you like, walk around a little bit, ride in a bus a bit, whatever you're doing, just try to do something that's not demanding of your focus during those little break periods, and you'll find it incredibly helpful. But in general, what we want to do is we want to encourage retrieval practice, because that will encourage both ways of learning, both types of sets of links, spaced repetition. Explanation encourages declarative learning. Varied practice encourages procedural learning, and interleaving encourages procedural learning. So interleaving is very important in language learning, but it's also important in learning math. So, for example, if you're teaching about the binomial distribution, the negative binomial distribution, and the geometric distribution, the tendency is just to say, "Oh, well, I'm going to give 10 problems of one, 10 of another, 10 of another." Well, what happens is they don't understand when to use a particular technique. They just know if they're supposed to use a technique, they know how to do it. So if you mix up or interleave problems, so instead of just giving, 7, let's say that's negative binomial right here, you give them a bunch of problems. Instead, negative binomial, and this is geometric, and this is negative binomial, which is new, and this one's binomial. Mix up the different problems. Or if you're speaking language, mix up future tense, past tense, at present tense, so that you're not just always blocking what they're learning. This interleaving is very important. It's a little bit like, learning to use which tool to use. If you always do 10 of one type of problem, after a while, it's sort of like hammering in a nail. You always use the hammer. So you think the hammer applies to all sorts of problems that it doesn't really apply to. So then you can end up using the wrong tool for a particular problem because you've not practiced varying those tools. I should also mention that there is a relationship between meditation and focused and diffuse forms of thinking. A mantra type of meditation, as it seems, is more focused, whereas open monitoring types of meditation, like mindfulness, sometimes can be more affiliated with default mode network, more diffuse ways of thinking. So there's much more and much deeper in that regard, but I just wanted to give you a little heads up that there's some fascinating relationships between meditation and different modes of thinking.